So before we get started, I would like to remind committee members and staff who are not speaking to mute their microphones. If I detect background noise during the meeting as a result of unmuted microphones, I will mute those microphones to avoid any distortion to the sound quality. There are members of the public, or actually there's not, but we also recommend that you please identify yourselves before speaking for the meeting minutes. Committee members participating from remote locations, please inform the chair, Dr. Thompson, if you have any members of the public present who wishes to make any comments. For those members of the public who are joining us via the webcasting, if you do decide to log into Webex, we'll give instructions on how to use that. We will be utilizing the Webex question and answer, or the Q&A, and also the hand raise features to facilitate public comment. When public comment is called, I will open the question and answer feature, which you will hear me refer to as Q&A, and members of the public joining us on Webex can click on the Q&A icon and indicate they would like to make a comment by inserting the word comment in the Q&A text box. And then clicking on, for those also on Webex, you can also click on the hand raise feature to raise your hand and lower your hand after you have spoken. For those calling in the meeting, you can dial *3 to raise your hand. And again, when you've been called on, *3 to lower your hand. After public comment has been taken from the DCA hearing room, I will call those individuals requesting comments through Webex. Each individual will be given permission to unmute their own microphone and will have 3 minutes to make their comments. I will provide a 30-second reminder when the allotted time is about to expire. At the conclusion of the 3 minutes, the individual's microphone will be muted and we will move on to the next member of the public who has a comment. Thank you. Back to you, Dr. Thompson.
Thank you so much. At this point, I would like to call to order the June 14th, 2022 meeting of the Naturopathic Medical Committee. It is 10:03 a.m. And Rebecca, if you could do a roll call.
Great, thank you, Dr. Thompson. Can everybody hear me okay?
Yes, we can.
Okay, perfect, thank you. Dr. Thompson?
Present, no members of the public at my location.
Thank you. Dr. Greta D'Amico?
Present.
Thank you. And Dr. Vera Singleton is absent today with cause. Dr. Deparshi Mukherjee?
Present.
Thank you. Dr. Bruce Davidson?
Present, and there are no members of the public with me at my location.
Wonderful, thank you. And Dr. Mina Yoon?
Present.
Great, thank you very much. Looks like we have quorum.
Wonderful. So at this point, we would like to move on to agenda item number 2, which is public comment for items not on the agenda. Moderator?
This is the moderator. I am now opening up the Q&A. The Q&A is now open. The instructions are on the screen for reference. Members of the public, if you would like to participate, click on the Q&A icon, which is a question mark inside of a square, and type comment in the text field and send to all panelists. For those calling in, you can raise your hand by pressing *3, or you can also raise your hand by clicking on the hand raise feature next to your name. No requests have been submitted through Webex. Would you like me to close the Q&A feature?
Yes, please do. And at this point, we're going to move on to our third agenda item, which is the review and possible approval of the March 24th committee meeting minutes. I know that Rebecca sent that out to all the committee members twice. So hopefully everyone's had a chance to review it. Are there any edits that anyone wants to bring up at this point? Okay, I'm not seeing anyone commenting for edits. So I would like to move that we approve the committee meeting minutes from March 24th, 2022. Do I have a second?
I'll second. This is Dr. D'Amico.
Great, thank you so much. I will go ahead and take a roll call vote. This is Rebecca. Dr. Dara Thompson,
Aye.
Dr. Greta D'Amico,
Aye.
Dr. Mukherjee,
Aye.
Dr. Davidson,
Aye.
thank you, and Dr. Yoon.
Aye.
Great, thank you. And that is going to be 5 ayes, and that will move forward.
Great. The next item on our agenda is the presentation and possible action of the OPS review for the National Nplex exam. Who's going to be giving that presentation?
That's going to be Dr. Tracy Montez, and she should be online here momentarily with us.
Good morning, everybody. I'm going to say hello, and then I'm going to pop off and let you focus on the PowerPoint presentation that will be provided by our moderators. Thank you very much. And I'll wait a moment until that loads, but I would like to thank the committee for this opportunity to present this morning. I have come before your committee before, but it's been a while. I am the chief of the Division of Programs and Policy Review. One of the units in my division is the Office of Professional Examination Services. And that is the unit that provides various support services for our licensing programs. There we go. So this morning, I'm going to go over validating state and national examination programs, focusing on your national examination program. And again, thank you for this opportunity. This morning, Heidi Linser is the chief of the Office of Professional Examination Services, also known as OPS. And again, I'm the division chief, and I'm here with you this morning to make this presentation and answer any follow-up questions. So if you move to the next slide, please, you'll see the topics that I'll be going over. Who is OPS? What are those regulations, technical standards, and professional guidelines that guide the work we do? Some of our clients, the purpose, obviously, of licensure examinations, and then national exam reviews. Why do we do them? And we, meaning OPS and all of our DCA regulatory entities that use licensure examinations. I'll talk about some next steps and then open it up to questions. Next slide, please. So OPS, we provide professional consulting services in examination development and validation to DCA's boards, bureaus, and committees. And when we talk about development and validation activities, we're talking about making sure that these examinations follow legal requirements, professional guidelines, and technical standards related to licensure examinations. And I always like to share, too, that these requirements and guidelines and standards are those that are accepted on a national level. The guidelines that OPS follows are not just necessarily related to the Department of Consumer Affairs or to the state of California, but they apply to all regulatory exams, all selection and employment exams, state, federal, national. So they're very important requirements that just as you have requirements and knowledge and skills and competencies in your fields of study, we do as well as test development experts. And so we use this information to help our programs here at DCA to adhere to these. And I'll talk a little bit about those shortly, but let's move on to the next slide so you can see the different clients that we work with. You'll notice we have numerous boards listed here. We have some of our bureaus, our committees, and we even have external clients. For example, I'm currently on the California State Bar's Blue Ribbon Commission on the future of the State Bar exam. So our expertise in OPS is known widely, and we utilize our expertise to help primarily our internal clients, but also sometimes other agencies and states as well. Within this slide here in these clients you see, we offer a range of services. Some of our boards and bureaus and committees, we do the full scope of exam validation, from developing the exam to assisting in how it's administered, ensuring the scope of practice, various things like that, to maybe some general consulting. For example, your committee, we've done some general consulting in the past. So again, we have a wide range of services. I'm not going to detail all of those today, but I'm more than happy to come back at another time or to give information to Rebecca to share with all of you about the different services that we provide. But of course, use the national exam. So you do have your vendor and your association that you work with as well. So let's move to the next slide, please. And I mentioned those very important laws, standards, and guidelines that we adhere to. The one regulation that's very important that does apply only to California is Business and Professions Code Section 139. This code was established because at the time the legislature felt that those national testing standards and guidelines were so important that DCA regulatory entities should be mandated to follow them. And they are based on the standards for educational and psychological testing, as well as the principles for the validation and use of personnel selection procedures. And the authors there are listed. These are two very important guidelines that guide research on licensure examinations, as well as selection examinations. They're also used if there's any litigation or challenges to examination programs. And so, again, very important laws, standards, and guidelines. What we do, again, is not arbitrary. It's based on law and science. Next slide, please. So the requirements for licensure examinations, again, we always like to reiterate these, even though we're well acquainted with them, but they are to provide a reliable method for identifying practitioners who are able to practice safely and competently. We focus on entry-level tasks and knowledge for important public protection, and we rely on subject matter experts in all phases of examination development to ensure that the examination reflects current practice. Now, why do I go over this? Because not everybody understands really the requirements of licensure examinations. People assume that it's an exam that might be developed inside of a board, bureau, or committee, and that it's sort of arbitrarily put together and it's used for gatekeeping, things like that. That's not the case. Again, we want to focus primarily on competencies for safe and competent practice. Entry level means that an individual who sits for the exam and passes the exam has met that standard to do no harm to the public. It doesn't mean that they're necessarily going to be a superstar in their practice. It doesn't necessarily mean it would be somebody that we would hire. It means simply that they have met that baseline of knowledge required for safe and competent practice. Subject matter experts are those that are licensed in the field. They're the ones that bring the content or practice expertise. So what makes an exam defensible is utilizing not only test specialists, but also your committee or your board or your staff members who are knowledgeable about the regulations and scope, but then also your licensees who know the practice. And so these are very important components that are required for licensure examinations and what adds what we call the evidence of validation, making sure they're not only robust, but they're also fair to those applicants who are sitting in the examination and participating in the process. The next slide, please. Okay, so let's go on to examination, national examination reviews. And this is what we'd like to propose to do for your national examination. It is due for a review. In order to be compliant with Business and Professions Code Section 139, your committee is required to take an in-depth look at the national examination to ensure that it continues to meet psychometric and legal standards. We also need to assess the extent to which California practitioners have been involved in the examination development process. We also want to look at it for the extent of California content. Is there anything unique that has been done in California that may need to be assessed or may not? But it's really important for all of our DCA regulatory entities that use national examinations to make sure that California practice is still being assessed in an important and critical manner, because sometimes states will veer off in terms of their scopes of practice. We know that scopes evolve, especially with COVID. We've seen a lot of changes in what practitioners can do with regard to COVID and vaccination. Whether or not they remain permanent, we don't know. But it's very important to regularly review scopes of practice and examinations to ensure that our candidates continue to be assessed on important content. Next slide, please. So as we do a national examination review, and again, we do this for many of our boards, Board of Psychology, Accountancy Board, I could go on, but there's many boards that we do, healing arts versus non-healing arts. But we take a look at their examinations, and there's three primary components. A psychometric evaluation, which is simply means looking at the testing components. Do they write their test questions following the appropriate guidelines? Do they construct their exams? Do they monitor how the item or the test are performing? Is it fair? Are candidates receiving their scores timely? Things like that. Then the comparison of the national OA to a California OA, that simply means occupational analysis OA. And what we mean here is that whenever you have an exam, you utilize an exam to make pass-fail decisions, you need to have a study, a methodological study that supports how you have written or developed that exam, and that's called an occupational analysis. So your national program has likely done what's called an occupational analysis. Sometimes it's referred to a job analysis, task analysis. And that's basically a survey of looking at your practitioners and what they're doing at a particular window in time. We take that information and we work with California licensees and we say, hey, is this consistent to what you are practicing? And of that, what is important for safe and competent practice? And that data supports the examination. That's what makes it job related or occupational related. It's a very critical piece of information. Occupational analyses are also used to support continuing education, as well as minimum requirements to sit for an examination. You always want to make sure that any decisions with regard to licensing to entering into that field have data to support those decisions. Simply sitting around and saying, gee, we think somebody should have a college degree or they need to be 18, or we need 20 hours of supervised experience. You can't just sort of pull those out of the air. They have to be based on data. So often the occupational analysis is a good start for gathering that data. The third step is then saying, okay, well, we've got all this data. Is there anything critical at the entry level that may not be assessed on that national exam? Typically what we see here is California laws and regulations. With many of our national programs, obviously, somebody who's practicing in Texas doesn't need to know California laws and regulations. So it's not going to be on that national exam. So the board, bureau, or committee at that time has to decide, do we want a supplemental exam? Some of our programs do that. Board of Behavioral Sciences uses some national exams. They also have a California law exam. Same thing with psychology. Board of Registered Nursing currently has a national exam, but no laws and exam. It's not determined to be necessary given how they practice. So again, it's a very unique situation that's evaluated occupation by occupation. But what's critical here is that each of these three components are measured and assessed, and the decisions are supported by the data and the evidence. Next slide, please. And again, I know I'm giving you lots of information. This can all be shared with you. This is, again, a public document. You can take it. We have handouts that describe, for example, each of these pieces on this slide. So again, when I talk about that psychometric evaluation, that first stage, we're looking at how that study is done, that occupational or job analysis. We're looking at how the exam is developed. We're looking at how passing scores are established. Again, there are actually techniques that are supported by research to ensure a fair and reliable passing score. We look at how that's applied in passing rates. Again, many individuals assume that scores are adjusted, sometimes for gatekeeping or for arbitrary reasons. That is not the case. A valid and reliable passing score should be based on the methodology used and not arbitrarily adjusted. We also look at how they administer the exam and the security. We know as technology gets more sophisticated, so do our candidates. Unfortunately, in subversion, not all candidates, but we do continue to have exam subversion and cheating situations. And so we need to evaluate that, because we don't want somebody getting licensed because they have somehow subverted the examination process. We also look at information available to candidates. Is the process transparent for how the exam is developed? Is the process transparent for how to schedule your exam, receive your results, if there's any materials to support exam preparation? California is very transparent, I should say, our Department of Consumer Affairs, in providing important information. And sometimes this is where we see differences with national associations. They hold things very closely. A lot of times it's copyright concerns, but we need to make sure our candidates understand how they're going to be evaluated, when and why. That is a reasonable expectation. So again, each of these components are part of that psychometric evaluation. I have more information I can share with that, but that's a snapshot of what we do here. The next slide, please. The second part, again, is where we take subject matter experts, practitioners, we have them look at what the national examination is assessing, and we talk about what's happening in California at this particular time. Are there areas that are unique that need to be discussed? We have a very diverse population, a very large state. We have health and safety laws. Sometimes we find there's gaps in the national exam that need to be measured. Not always. Sometimes they can be covered through an attestation where somebody acknowledges that I am responsible for the laws and regulations, and that's sufficient. Again, it depends on where you have enforcement issues. And then again, the criticality of these different competencies that might not be assessed. Next slide, please. So what we do is at the very end is we take a look at everything, including that overlap, and we make some recommendations. Again, not going to spend a lot of time on this slide because your board does use a national exam. It's been working well for you. You wouldn't necessarily anticipate any changes, but these are, again, the things that we look at if there's anything critical missing. Next slide, please. So I've gone through this national review process rather quickly. I've covered a lot. I know it's a lot to digest at this time, but what I'd like you to take away, and it doesn't have to, the decision doesn't have to be made now, but what I want to again alert you to is that it is time to do a review of your national exam program. It's something that our office can do for you. We know you have a small program with regard to staffing and resources, so this is something that we would take on. For the most part, I would say 99% of the work would be performed by OPES, and we would do it at a very cost-effective manner, so not as to burden your committee. But it is something very important that must be done with regard to Business and Professions Code Section 139. Again, it's a methodological study that we would engage the National Association with, and we would work closely with your committee in terms of providing updates. It's nothing unique or new for your committee. Again, it's something that we do with all of our programs. So at this time, I'd like to open it up to any questions that you might have. And again, happy to come back and visit at any other time or provide any follow-up handouts. Thank you.
Thank you so much for that comprehensive presentation. This is Chair Thompson. I think that we all probably have some questions and would appreciate getting copies of that presentation because it was so detailed. Being able to go back and look at the detail would be extremely helpful. So my first question is, you know, if you were to conduct this review and there were issues that you found with the national exam, what would be the next steps after that? Would you then come to our committee to review those, or that, you know, what is the process with that?
Excellent question. So yes, that's what we would do. We would first meet with Rebecca and give her some information about what we see and how things are evolving. And then depending upon the type of information, when we go to board meetings, sometimes we have to do this in a closed session, depending upon the confidentiality of the information. So we essentially enter into a non-disclosure agreement with these national associations because we want to assure them that we're going to keep sensitive information confidential, but it's usually a negotiation process where we will explain that the public has a right to know information and that it's best to do our report in a public forum. And usually we can get to that point because we're not interested in sharing test questions, things like that. The information that we would present in public is the same type of information that we would present for a state exam. But typically what we would come with a summary of what we found in each of these areas, and most likely we would have some general recommendations. And a lot of those recommendations have to do with being more transparent. We rarely see anything that is that would be of concern. Again, national examination programs typically have their own psychometricians, they're specialists, so they're working along these guidelines. So, for example, sometimes we see a common thing with national exams is we have educators involved in the process. Our department does not support having educators or instructors writing test questions. Even though they may write great test questions for their classes, they really shouldn't be involved in a licensure exam process where they could potentially, it could pose a conflict of interest. It's not a deal breaker, but it's really not best practices. So we would have those types of recommendations that would be presented to your committee, and your committee may say, okay, that's great, thank you very much. Or you may say, yeah, let's follow up, let's have some discussions with the national. Again, that's typically what we do with our other programs. We say, here's 6 things that we have some concerns with, and the national may say, yeah, that's good, or no, we can't do that. And again, it just becomes a dialogue. When we talk about making sure our exams are fair, valid, and legally defensible, it's not an all or none situation. It's a process of gathering evidence. With DCA and OPS, we strive for the most evidence and the best exam, the most robust exam. National, depending upon their situation, because they're covering so many states, they may not be able to address all of our recommendations, and that's fair. So again, to summarize, we would present recommendations to your committee and get guidance in terms of, would you like us to continue the dialogue with the national, or is your committee comfortable? And that's fine, either way. We like to have a nice relationship with all of our national exam programs because it's just helpful in the long run with regard to this regular review that should be occurring based on Business and Professions Code Section 139. Thank you.
I had another question, and if anyone else on the committee has questions, please just raise your hand and we'll open up for you. So what is our timeline? You said this is something that's required for the review to happen, and I just know for us, even if it is very economical, it has to be worked into our budget. So what is our timeline for having this happen?
Your timeline is very flexible. We would work with you. We would give you the cost, and we would work with your committee to see when that could happen. It would be nice to get started this fiscal year, and again, we will be extremely sensitive to your budget and your program size, but it's very flexible. There's no firm deadline.
Thank you so much for your time. Are there any members of the committee or Rebecca that have any questions or comments?
No comments from me. Thank you.
I really do think it was such a clear presentation that it was really well laid out. At this point, then I'd like to call for any public comments.
This is the moderator. I'm opening up the Q&A. The Q&A is now open. The instructions are on the screen. If you would like to participate, click on that question mark inside of a square, type comment, and send to all panelists. Those calling in can raise their hand by clicking or pressing *3, and also those calling in can raise their hand. Those logged in can raise their hand by clicking the raised hand icon next to their name. No requests have been submitted. Would you like me to close the Q&A feature?
Yes, please do. So I think that this is something we would have to approve as committee as far as paying for this and figuring out the timing. So Rebecca, should we be adding this to our next meeting agenda to approve and figure out the timeline on it?
Sure, I can speak with Dr. Montez offline, and we'll figure out kind of what the cost is going to look like and what our timeline in relation to staffing resources and that type of thing are going to be required from us. But yeah, we can definitely bring this back to the committee at a later date.
Right, and at that point, just with specifics that we can approve or not approve, that would be perfect.
Okay, yeah, I don't think that there's anything that you guys would have to approve at this point. unless there's a big cost to us, then I'd probably bring that to you guys. But if it's something that we can just take in with our current budget, I think we should be okay.
Excellent. Thank you.
Great. Thank you.
All right, at this point, we're going to move on to agenda item number 5, which is review and possible action of the Genesis Medical College application for intravenous therapy training course provider. So in California, in order to be certified in IV therapy, our licensees have to take classes through a certified provider, and I'm assuming these folks are applying to be one of those. Rebecca.
Great, thank you so much. So this is Genesis Medical College had submitted an application a couple of months ago, and because this is our first provider request for a new course to be added to our IV therapy providers, I thought that we would go ahead and bring this to the committee just because we don't have anybody with the medical technical skills on our end to make sure that all of the items are here that would need to be met in the IV therapy requirements for our licensees. So I wanted to bring this in front of the committee today just to kind of go through it. Just based off what I've seen, I don't know that it's going to meet the the requirements, but I just wanted to bring this to your attention. So I provided. No problem. I provided everybody with the application along with the Genesis Medical College flyer and also their hourly breakdown of their IV therapy. They also include blood withdrawal, so it makes me think that this has a little bit more leaning towards the phlebotomy side of things, but again, bringing it to those with the technical expertise. And then, of course, the Genesis Medical College course information. And then lastly, I believe that there's the CV included of the instructor, Crowley. So those items were provided to our committee members, and I hope that you all were able to review that and then to look and make sure that it met the requirements in our IV therapy.
So Rebecca, to be clear, this is something that we would be voting on today, whether to approve or not approve them as a provider?
That is correct, yes. And I think I've seen Dr. D'Amico with her hand raised.
Dr. D'Amico, please.
Yeah, I'm not sure if the rest of you had time to go over the curriculum, but if you look at our regulations and compare them to their curriculum, they're missing several key points, including evaluating the need and type of IV to give based on the diagnosis of the patient, evaluating the patient by labs and exam for suitability and safety of IVs, as well as the different types of IVs that can be given, the different substances and why and when and where you would use those and how much. All of that is missing from their curriculum. I think it seems to be much more nursing oriented, like here's your orders, here's how to make sure the osmolarity is correct and how to be safe in terms of inserting and removing the IV and checking the process, but not about what's actually in the IV. So for this reason, I'd recommend that we do not approve them at this time. We can give them feedback about what needs to be in their curriculum if they want to come back to us at a later date.
Thank you, Dr. D'Amico. I think Dr. Davidson also has his hand raised.
Dr. Davidson.
Thank you. Good morning. Yes, appreciate the information, all the information. And I also noted there were some areas in our code that didn't seem to be covered by the curriculum. One of the ones that I wanted to comment on was I can't really see in their materials that they have anything that's related to being a practicum. I note in the code, it specifically says there has to be a practicum section with the observation of at least 10 IV setups. and the successful completion of at least 10 IB setups. So I don't believe that's represented in the curriculum and that if that's the case, that would be another gap.
It sounds like we have really two options here, which Dr. D'Amico touched on, which is either we can simply say this just doesn't meet our criteria, which is obvious from this review, or we can say this doesn't meet our criteria. If you still want to be one of our providers, we can talk to you about what things are required and see if you want to come up to those standards. So do we have a preference on that? Right now, we're not really lacking in IV therapy course providers, but I think that giving more flexibility to licensees as long as they're actually getting an appropriate education is a good thing.
This is Bruce again. I would say I would support the idea of letting them know where the gaps are, or perhaps providing them with a copy of the required elements and asking if they wish to resubmit, to modify and resubmit. I would support that. Also, I just wanted to comment that it seems as though that only one CV is provided, but on their materials they list maybe five. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 instructors. So I would imagine that's another area that needs to be completed. Thanks.
Thank you. I appreciate the feedback on that. So yeah, we definitely, Dr. Thompson, we do have a couple of ways we can do this. We will definitely be able to deny this if that is what you guys choose to do today. We can write up a denial for this application provider, and then of course let them know where their deficiencies were and kind of provide them the information to our IV therapy statutes so that they can either come up to our standards or and then can apply again, or they will move along. So we can definitely do that, but we will need to take an action vote on this today.
So this is Dr. Thompson. I would move that we decline this application, but then provide education to the provider and see if they would like to reapply at a later date.
I second. Sorry, go ahead.
That's okay. I second as well. This is Dr. Yoon.
Great. Rebecca, can you take a vote?
Great. Okay, we need to take public comment, please.
Yes, if you could open public comment, moderator.
This is the moderator. The Q&A is open. The instructions are on the screen. If you would like to participate, click the question mark inside of a square, type comment in the text field, and send it to all panelists. You can also raise your hand by pressing the *3 button if you're calling in, or if you're logged in, you can press on the hand raise feature. No requests have been submitted. Would you like me to close the Q&A feature?
Yes, please do.
Great, thank you. I will go ahead and take a roll call vote on this, and this is to decline the IV therapy training course provider application for Genesis Medical College and provide educational materials to the provider. Dr. Thompson?
Aye.
Dr. D'Amico?
Aye.
Dr. Mukherjee?
Aye.
Dr. Davidson?
Aye.
And Dr. Yoon?
Aye.
Great, thank you, and that moves with 5 ayes.
Thank you so much. The next agenda item is the review and possible action on legislative updates, discussion and possible action on proposed bills. So this has several items that we're going to go through. Are you doing this, Rebecca, or is Rose Turner doing this review?
We have Ms. Rose Turner from the Legislative Affairs Office with us today, and she's going to provide an overview of all of the bills.
Wonderful. Welcome. We're looking forward to it.
Thank you. Can everyone hear me?
Yes, we can hear you. Thank you.
Perfect. This is great. My name is Rose Turner. I'm from the Department of Consumer Affairs, Division of Legislative Affairs, and it's wonderful to meet everyone. Great. So we're going to get started with AB 225. This bill died, which is great. But it would have required certain boards and bureaus within the department to issue temporary licenses for veterans and active duty members of the armed forces if they met specified criteria. I'm not sure how much detail you want to go into. Yeah. Oh, sorry. Perfect. Thanks. Okay. Next slide. Okay, moving on to AB 646. Boards and bureaus have the authority to suspend or revoke a license on the basis of a criminal conviction. Currently, to allow for consumer transparency, conviction information can be posted with a licensee's suspension or revocation information on a board's or bureau's website. Licensees, defendants, are ordinarily able to petition the court to set aside a guilty verdict if they have completed all or a substantial portion of their probation requirements. This is called an expungement. This bill would require a board to remove evidence on the board's website if a defendant's criminal conviction has been expunged. And this bill is pending before the Senate Appropriations Committee. Next slide. AB 852 was recently amended to remove all provisions unrelated to electronic prescribing. There was a lot more in this bill previously about nursing practices, but currently now it would prohibit a pharmacist from refusing to fill an electronic prescription if the prescription doesn't comply with pharmacist's proprietary software. It would permit a pharmacy or pharmacist to decline or dispense a prescription that fails to meet specified criteria like HIPAA compliance, and it establishes additional exceptions for the ordinary electronic prescriptions rule. Probably the most important sections for naturopathic doctors are those related to the pharmacy's prohibition on refusing to fill prescriptions from a prescriber that's using another specialized software, because software can be fairly proprietary, and like exceptions to the general electronic prescribing requirements. Next slide, please.
I had a quick question about the last item.
Sure, yeah.
So I know that for a lot of naturopathic doctors, the biggest issue with e-prescribing has been communication with compounding pharmacies.
Yes.
So is there anything in this particular bill that addresses that, or that we should know about? Because I think that would directly impact our licensees.
There's nothing in this bill that directly impacts compounding pharmacies or directly calls out compounding pharmacies in particular, but it does generally prohibit pharmacies from refusing to fill electronic prescriptions, no matter the software that they receive them from.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, and I'm going to turn it over to Rebecca for SB 994.
Thank you. I'd like to go ahead and just present on SB 994, which is the vocational nursing direction of naturopathic doctors, just because I've been working with both the CNDA and the folks over at BVNPT, also with the DCA legislation or legislative office and the budget affairs office. And I just wanted to let everybody know that this bill would authorize licensed vocational nurses to work under the direction of a naturopathic doctor. It will not broaden the scope for either the practitioner, the LVN, or the ND. Both members would be required to still work within their current scope. ND is not required to be on site to provide supervision. There has been some pushback on this. However, because of the reason for LVNs to be in an ND practice, we felt that this was one of the main reasons was to have an LVN or a professional that was skilled enough to be able to take an order from a naturopathic doctor, and that the naturopathic doctor would not have to be on site all the time. So that was something that we pushed back with. And so we are still definitely working with the author's office, with CNDA, who is the sponsor of the bill. And I just wanted to kind of give you guys this. It does look like it's moving along right now. Of course, the legislature is in recess until, do you know when? I believe it's the first part of August, right?
Yeah.
So once they get back, we hope to have worked all of the little tweaks out with the BVNPT board, and we'll definitely be bringing this back to you guys as it's moving along. Are there any questions on the SB 994? All right, I don't think I see any, so I'm going to go ahead and give this back over to Rose. Thank you.
Okay, moving on to SB 1031. This is another one that's dead, but it would have required renewal fees for licenses, for an active license fees to be half of the amount of an active license fee, unless a board or bureau had already established a lower fee. Next slide, please. We have AB 1102. This bill hasn't moved in a while. It's a 2-year bill, and it's in the inactive file, but like it's not dead. It's just not active. Could come back. But it would clarify that an out-of-state telephone medical advice service that serves patients in California has to operate consistent with California laws, including like scope of practice laws, complying with the directions provided by healing arts boards and other entities governing healthcare. Next slide, please. Okay. AB 1120. Okay. This bill would authorize a certified phlebotomy technician to collect blood through a peripheral venous catheter under specified conditions. And it is in the Senate's third reading file, so it is moving along. And let's see, I think Rebecca would like to talk about the next slide, which is AB 2685.
This is Dr. D'Amico. On the previous one, do you know what the motivation was for the catheter blood draw?
Yes, that's a very good question. So California law doesn't currently allow phlebotomists to collect blood from IV lines, like, you know, the ones where you're in the hospital and they like stick them in your arm and IV lines. However, IV catheters are commonly used in hospitals, and they can act as like a port. So it's really easy to get blood from them, and they act as so a port will eliminate further punctures to the patient and reduce opportunities for infection because the port is there and it's kind of sealed but kind of open because it's already in place. So it basically just allows phlebotomists to do that.
Yeah, great. Thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome.
All right, thank you so much, Rose. So I'm going to go ahead and, this is Rebecca again, I'm going to go ahead and present on AB 2685. This is the Naturopathic Doctors Act. This is our sunset bill, and of course when this first was presented, there was nothing in it except for the fact that the authority that provided the appointments for our committee members could remove those said members at any time for any reason. However, since then, our sunset has been moving along quite well, and we've had some amendments to the bill language. So currently, our bill has a amendment to change the name and location of the Naturopathic Medicine Committee from out of under the Osteopathic Medical Board and as a board under the Department of Consumer Affairs. It also specifies that each appointing authority has the power to remove any board member, as I had just presented. It also requires the board to employ a full-time staff for enforcement against unlicensed activity. It also would authorize the board to require elective naturopathic physicians licensing examination, Nplex. There have been some additional elective exam components, and so this will give the board, or well, the committee right currently, the authority to take any of those elective exams and make them a requirement as well. It would also authorize CE requirements that can be met through courses approved by the North American Naturopathic Continuing Education Accreditation Council, or NANCIAC. It will also correct exam titles for naturopathic childbirth attendant specialty and extend the sunset date of the Naturopathic Medicine Committee for another 4 years until January 1st, 2027. At this time, let me see here, sorry, I'm trying to read. So at the time that the amendments were made, they had provided a name that we would be called after the committee changes to the board, and that would have been the, I believe, the Naturopathic Medicine Board. However, after some discussion and some feedback from some of the committee members and some stakeholders, they asked that we change the name to the California Board of Naturopathic Medicine. We did have one of the members who asked that we try to get in parity with some of the other states and be called the Naturopathic Medical Board. However, we did have some conversation with the CMA, and they did not approve of that, but they did support the name being changed to the California Board of Naturopathic Medicine. So we have worked with the author's office to see about getting that changed within the amended text. Are there any questions about any of this?
This is Dr. D'Amico. On an upcoming agenda item for this meeting, there is the suggestion that a change in regulations about specialized injections be to 6 years for renewal, or that we were considering that and that it should be put in a sunset review. Is that this year, or would this be in 4 years from now? Was that in there? Because I don't remember.
No, so those are actually in the regulations, and those are actually the regulations that we're currently proposing. So those they haven't even went over to the Office of Administrative Law yet. So we're still working on those, and I think we're going to be talking about that in an agenda item later on in this meeting. So we will touch on that as well, Greta. But yes,
Okay.
you're correct. We changed it from 5 years to, I believe you guys changed it to 6.
But it wasn't part of this sunset bill, correct?
I'm sorry?
There's something that it mentions on there that it should be in the sunset bill, and I just was saying it's not in this sunset bill, I don't think, right?
No, it's not in the sunset.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
So we can assume that everything else that was in there, this is pretty much the substance of it as it stands at the moment. Got it.
That is correct. So all of the items and issues that we presented within our sunset report, these are the items that the joint committees had taken, some urgent action on, and they went ahead and put that in the new text for the sunset bill, and this is what they've come up with. There was some talk about putting the unlicensable naturopaths under a board. They were looking at of course, our program, and I believe the Department of Public Health. However, that was not successful, and instead the committees have decided that it would be more beneficial to provide us another staff member to just enforce the laws that are already currently laid out in our statute.
Does that come with some sort of budget to fund that staff person?
So it gives us the authority for the staff member, and then we have to go through our normal processes in order to ask for the budgetary authority for that position.
Well, that represents an improvement, I believe, so that's something. Thank you.
Yes, I will take it. Thank you. Any other questions?
Just clarifying the additional Nplex electives. So would this, for example, allow us to require the parental therapy exam in California? Is that where this is coming from?
That's exactly, yes, that is exactly it.
Okay, great, thanks.
Thank you.
Hi, this is Bruce. I had a couple of questions.
Sure.
Thanks. So with regard to the name, that's great. When will that become effective?
So this will become effective as soon as the legislature comes back from recess and they start going through all of the bills and making the approvals. Do you know January 1st, right? January 1st, it would become effective.
I see. Okay, thanks. And then the location, does that mean that the new board will be directly under DCA rather than under some other group?
That is correct, yes. So we will be directly under DCA, just like the medical board, the osteopathic medical board, and all of the other boards that are out there. So we will no longer be under the osteopathic medical board, but we do appreciate them, keeping us and giving us a home this whole entire time. So we do respect that. Thank you.
Yes, thank you.
Of course. Any other questions?
This is Dr. D'Amico. Forgive me if I missed it at the beginning. At what stage, what committee, what side of the House are we in currently?
So this bill was a due pass. I believe it is in appropriations right now. Let me just take a quick look here. Yep, it's currently in appropriations.
And that is a joint board of the Senate and Assembly?
So no, that's its own appropriations. Is there two appropriations?
Both the Senate and the Assembly have.
Yeah, so we started on the Senate side, and I think we already went through Senate appropriations now.
Right, hang on.
So both the Senate and the Assembly have an appropriations committee. We already went through the Assembly Appropriations Committee because the Assembly is the bill's House of Origin. So this is the Senate Appropriations Committee.
Thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome.
And it looks like that Senate Appropriations date, hearing date will be August 1st. Any other questions? Okay, I don't think I see any, so I will go ahead and let this back over to Rose. Thank you.
That's actually the last bill. Yeah.
So sorry, we've already went through that very quickly. So I guess that was the last bill that we had for you guys today. So thank you for coming, Rose, and for presenting that for us. Were there any questions on any of these bills that Rose or I presented on today that you guys have questions about?
This is Dr. Thompson. I just have one last question regarding our sunset. Is there anything that we as a committee need to do regarding the sunset at this time, or are we simply waiting at this point to see if anyone comes back to us with questions?
Yeah, so currently what will happen is we've already presented the Appropriations Committee with our fiscal impact, just basically kind of telling them what it's going to cost us in order to implement these changes. And it was pretty low, so I don't think that there's going to be any problems with it, but, you know, something can always happen in appropriations. They've done things before, changed amendments to text and that kind of thing in appropriations before, but I don't foresee anything happening at this point, any other changes. So I think that this is kind of what we're going to see from here on out until it is signed by the governor.
As the Department of Consumer Affairs representative, I cannot tell you to take a position on this bill, but as a private citizen, I highly recommend that the committee take a position on this bill.
Rose, you beat me to the punch. I was actually going to go through and recommend some positions on all of the bills now that we've went through them, but thank you so much for that. Yes, I actually would recommend, I know that the committee had taken a watch stance on AB 2685 during our last meeting. And I wanted to let you know that now that there is actual text involved, and if you guys would want to take a stance on this, I would recommend, staff recommends a supportive stance on AB 2685, and this would give us another 4 years of work to do.
I have a quick question. This is Dr. D'Amico.
Okay.
Just to check with the rest of the committee members present, you know, there was some going around about the name of the new board. And so from what you said, they suggested Naturopathic Medicine Board, and it ended up as Board of Naturopathic Medicine. Not too terribly different, but we will be living with it potentially for many decades to come. So just want to make sure everybody's feeling good about it. Not that we could necessarily change it if we wanted to, but we could make a last minute, you know, we could make some noise about it if we wanted to.
Yeah, so it would either be the California Board of Naturopathic Medicine or the Naturopathic Medicine Board of California. And it just seemed with everybody that I've talked with about this, it flows a little bit easier, and it's kind of what some of the other programs have taken with the California Board of being, you know, in the first part of that name. So it's definitely up to you. I can reach out to both of the Assembly and Senate, and if you guys are not okay with the California Board of Naturopathic Medicine, but that's definitely something that you guys would need to agree upon.
I think we mostly are, but I just wanted to make sure no one felt like it slipped by without them having a chance to voice their opinion.
Perfect. Thank you, Greta. I appreciate that. Yeah, actually, you guys are the ones that provided this feedback to me that I took to the author of the bill. So thank you for bringing that up. So, and I think that this is probably the best title for us, but it's again, definitely on you guys to make that decision.
Was there anything in our original set of asks in the sunset review that seems to be missing, that was an easy thing?
You mean some of our asks in the sunset that did not quite make it to our sunset bill?
Yeah.
There was quite a substantial amount of things that were in there that weren't on here, but
I mean relatively non-controversial items.
yeah, the majority of the items that we seen that were challenges or issues of concern or that presented safety issues to the consumers, the majority of those have been addressed in this language. So there's only a couple of things that were not addressed that I believe that this was probably not the avenue and vehicle to take those requests. So we can definitely start working with other authors outside of the sunset bill process to get all of those other issues acknowledged.
Thank you.
Okay, did you guys want to go ahead and take a stance on these bills? We can go ahead and go through them really quick and take votes.
Do we need to take public comment first?
Yes, we would have to take public comments.
Great. Why don't we do that, and then we can go through them item by item.
Okay, sure. Perfect.
This is the moderator. I've opened up the Q&A. The instructions are on the screen for your reference. If you would like to participate and are logged into Webex, you can click on the question mark inside of a square and type comment in the text field and click send, making sure it sends to all panelists. If you are logged into Webex and would like to raise your hand, click on the raised hand icon, which will appear if you hover your mouse over your name. And lastly, if you called in, just press *3 to raise your hand. No requests have been submitted through Webex. Would you like me to close the Q&A feature?
Yes, please do. All right, so if we could just go through the agenda items one by one. If the bill is no longer active, I think we can just skip that. There were two that you said were dead and were simply not active anymore.
Yes, so we can go ahead and start with AB 646. This is the Department of Consumer Affairs Board's expunged convictions. I don't have any recommendations on this bill. I do believe that other programs have taken a supportive stance on these. We're just confirming, but I believe that a lot of the other programs have taken a stance of support on this.
So just to review, this is the one where if a conviction has been expunged over time, it is no longer listed on the profile of the licensee. Is that correct?
Right. So just for example, if we had a licensee that had a criminal conviction and we took action on their license based on that criminal conviction, if that criminal conviction that we took action on was expunged, we would have to, at that point, remove that information off of the website and not act upon that as if it never happened. There would be a $25 fee to perform these activities, so the staff would be getting compensated for the work, the resources that they have to provide to do that.
So is there any way that we would be able to act on something if if a conviction is expunged, it's gone legally, so how would we have any ability to act on it anyway?
So there's been times where a criminal conviction has happened and we take action on their license based on the criminal conviction. Let's say that it was set aside, a diversion of some type, and it was set aside, they get through the diversion, and then that conviction is removed. We, at that point, would have no authority to, from my understanding, would not have the authority to go after them or to continue our actions against our license based on that conviction. Now, if there was other factors, of course, we would still be able to use those, but that conviction we would not be able to use as a factor.
Rebecca, can you say, or if does anyone know, what is the problem that this bill is attempting to solve?
You know, I don't know. I know that we've had a lot of movement towards keeping professional licensees licensed and working, and when there is a process that a licensee can, prove that what happened was not their fault or that they have been rehabilitated. There has been a lot of pushback and work with the legislature to make sure that those people have an opportunity to get back to work. So I believe that kind of plays on everything that we've been kind of seeing moving along with the legislature right now.
Well, so you said if they were proved to be innocent, that's one thing. If they were rehabilitated, that's a different thing. So
it is, but unfortunately, if the conviction is removed, it's removed, and it doesn't matter how or why it was removed. We would just have to follow the law and remove it from our website and any actions that we had taken on it.
Well, I'll say for myself, at this time, I feel neutral on this bill. I don't feel a strong need to support or not support it.
That's fair. Anybody else feel the same?
This is Dr. Thompson. I don't feel like I have quite enough information to support or not support it. I do believe that as a society, we need to allow people to be rehabilitated and accept that they are, or we're all just stuck with a single mistake that follows us for the rest of our lives, you know? So I think that having this theoretically in place sounds very good, but I don't feel like I have enough information to know if it may become an issue as far as, you know, public safety being our first priority. Would anything in this negatively impact the public safety in some way?
Sure, and I can respect that. I've heard the same with other types of bills similar to this in terms of the rehabilitation and the prior convictions and having them removed, and then we are not able to even see what those past convictions were, especially when it's very highly related to their work. So I have seen both sides of this coin and both opinions on this. So I definitely respect that. At this point, if you guys feel pretty much the same throughout the committee, what we can do is just remain neutral on this, or we can take a watch stance and just kind of watch it as it moves through. You definitely don't have to take a stance on this if you do not choose to.
This is Dr. D'Amico. My sense would be just to not take a stance at all. This is a bigger picture. This is a result of a bigger picture philosophy that is really being handled at the level of the legislature. And, you know, the rest of the state will have to harmonize itself with whatever that direction ends up being. But it's not really our purview to decide these bigger picture questions, because there are a lot of details, like you mentioned, that could potentially adversely affect our either our licensees or the public, and we just can't read into all of that from this.
Sure, I totally understand. And, you know, even with these types of bills, if we don't per se agree with them, what we can do is make sure that we're collecting the data. If we do see that there are adverse actions or consequences because of a bill like this, those are the things that we report back to the legislature when that time comes. So if we see something like that, we would definitely start letting them know, and I believe that the other programs and boards would do the same. So it looks like we're okay with not taking a stance on this bill at this point.
Well, did you say we could take a watch stance?
Yes, definitely. You guys can take a watch stance if you'd like.
Because I think that's what we're saying is we're going to watch it.
Okay. Do I have a motion?
I motion that we take a watch stance on AB 646.
This is Dr. D'Amico. I just want to clarify that not taking a stance and taking a watch stance are qualitatively different from each other.
Yes, that is correct.
The watch implies that we have a keen interest in the bill and that we're kind of keeping it on the table, whereas no comment doesn't imply anything at all.
That would be, yes, that or a neutral stance.
This is Michael Knott, your legal counsel. So we have a motion on the floor that needs to be seconded or not. There wasn't a second.
I can withdraw that motion if the committee prefers to do a neutral or no stance.
Yeah, it doesn't look like we had a second on that. It didn't move. So you guys just want to go ahead and take no stance on this at this time? Okay. All right, we'll go ahead and move along. So we're at...
You can't see our heads bobbing up and down.
No worries. AB 852, this is the Healthcare Practitioners Electronic Prescriptions. Basically, this one here, I would suggest or recommend that you guys take a supportive stance on this, as it could have the ability to hinder your ability to write prescriptions and have them filled if this does not go through. So I think that's what we've been seeing. We've had actually personally had a couple of phone calls from licensees saying, hey, this pharmacy won't fill this because I'm not using, you know, A, B, C prescription services or whatever. So this has been a hindrance a little bit to some of our licensees, I know firsthand. So a recommendation, I believe, on this one would be to take a supportive stance. Do I have any questions or motions?
I'll make a motion to support AB 852.
I will second that.
Who was my second? Dr. Thompson?
Dr. Thompson.
Perfect, thank you. Okay, I'll go ahead and take a roll call vote for this. Dr. Thompson?
Aye.
Dr. D'Amico?
Aye.
Again? Okay. I was just advised that we need to take a public comment on the motion, so I will go ahead and ask for public comment, please.
This is the moderator. I'm opening up the Q&A. It is now open. The instructions are on the screen for your reference. If you would like to participate and are logged in, click on the question mark inside of a square, typically located bottom right corner of your Webex screen. Type comment in the text field and send it to all panelists. If you rather raise your hand, click on the raise hand icon next to your name when you hovered your mouse over your name. And lastly, if you call in, you can press *3 to raise your hand. No requests have been submitted. Would you like me to close the Q&A?
Yes, please do.
Perfect. I will go ahead and return to our roll call. Dr. Thompson.
Aye.
Great. Dr. D'Amico.
Aye.
Dr. Mukherjee.
Aye.
Dr. Davidson.
Aye.
And Dr. Yoon.
Aye.
Great. We've got 5 ayes, and that moves. Thank you. All right, and next is going to be SB 994, Vocational Nursing Direction of Naturopathic Doctors. And this one, of course, we would have a recommendation for a support position on SB 994. It looks like we had originally taken a support position back on the March 24th meeting. So at this time, I recommend no changes to the support position.
Is that something that requires a vote, or if we don't do anything, it remains?
You're still in a support position. If you don't do it, there's no action needed unless you want to change the position.
Great, thank you.
And I don't think I see any requests for a change, so we will move along. Okay, SB 1031 unfortunately died. I was really banking on this to go through because it would make my job of getting these regulations done a lot easier, but unfortunately it did not succeed. So we will try to get that done in another avenue. AB 1102, Telephone Medical Advice Services. On this one, staff recommends a stance of support on this.
This is Dr. Thompson. I had one question about this. I was unclear if they meant that when people out of state are providing telephone medical advice services in California, they need to practice within the scope of that state, or they actually need to be licensed in that state.
Hang on one second, I'm just reading a little bit of this. Yeah, so it looks like it would require the practitioner or the medical advice services to comply with California state law and scope of whatever that is.
Even though that's already a requirement, apparently this bill is addressing a problem that is not being followed, I imagine. Do you know anything more about that?
I would imagine that there was an uptick in some challenges during COVID with the increase of telephone medicine, telemedicine being used. So I believe that this was just kind of being put there to ensure that that those that are providing those services to our patients here in California, that they are being met.
So this is Dr. Thompson. My question for this is, would this mean that, say, a naturopathic doctor who's not licensed in California and is in another state could provide telemedicine services to a person living in California without being licensed in the state of California?
No. So a naturopathic doctor in another state would not be able to practice in California, even via telemedicine, unless they were licensed here as well. I think this is more in line with medical advice services. So these are, you see them, you've kind of seen them popping up, but they have like the hormones where you can contact a different state and ask, for hormone therapy, blah, blah, blah. So I think that some of that has that type of relevance to it, but I don't believe that it's actual practitioners per se. They still would have to be licensed here in order to practice here, even via telephone or virtual.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm. All right. Was the committee wanting to take a stance on this at all? Okay. I don't see any motions, so I will go ahead and go on to the next bill, which is AB 1120.
I think for that last one, I think for that last one, a lot of us are just kind of mulling over it, like, what is the scenario here? What does this mean exactly? It sounds really good. It sounds very reasonable to support it, but I just, it's such a, it's 3 sentences on something that we haven't thought about before. It's kind of.
Absolutely. And, we can just kind of watch it as it moves along. And if at any other time you guys want to take a stance on it at our next meeting, if we have a meeting before this moves through, then of course you can make that determination at that time.
Do you know if that bill was brought by another of the medical boards or associations?
I'm not sure. Rose, do you know who the sponsor is on this? Hang on one moment and we'll find out for you. Who was it introduced by? Yeah. It looks like it's just author sponsored. Looks like Senator Hertzberg. Is it an Assemblymember Lowe bill? Yes. Yep, this is Assemblymember Lowe's bill.
Well, I mean, I don't know if anybody wants to talk about it anymore, but if they're giving medical advice, they need to follow our laws. But it's also okay to let it ride for a while. So.
Sure, and that's what we kind of were thinking as well. So that's why we recommended a stance, support stance on this. But if you guys are not comfortable with that at this time, we can definitely just watch this as it moves through.
I'd love to hear from anybody else if they have what they're thinking.
I don't see any problem with it as long as Dr. Thompson, as long as it, I expressed my one concern, which is it allowing practitioners not licensed in the state to practice in the state. Like, is it a workaround? And if that is not going on, then I think it sounds like a good idea that you should be complying with the licenses or the rules of the state that you're offering advice.
Right. And it looks like this is a 2-year bill. So I think this is in the first year anyway. So it looks like you guys would have time to take a stance on this at a later date. Currently, this is in the inactive file. It's not dead. It just hasn't been acted upon yet. So we do have some time if it doesn't die next year. We are in the second year? Oh, my apologies. This is in the second year, so it may not do anything at this point.
It's not dead, but it's in cardio.
Yeah, okay. All right, so we can definitely move along with without taking an action on this. All right. So at this point, we're at AB 1120, which is the clinical laboratories blood withdrawal. The committee staff has no recommendations on this bill, but urges the committee to take a stance on the bill that you would consider to be in the best interest of the consumer.
I'd like to make a motion to support this bill. This is Dr. D'Amico.
Do we have a second?
Hi, this is Dr. Mukherjee. I can second this.
Perfect. Thank you so much. All right, and I think we need to go out for comment. Public comment, please.
As the moderator, I've opened up the Q&A. The instructions are on the screen for your reference. If you would like to participate, click on the question mark inside of a square, type comment in the text field, and send it to all panelists. You can raise your hand by clicking on the hand icon next to your name, or you can press *3 if you're calling in and would like to raise your hand. No requests have been submitted. Would you like me to close the Q&A feature?
Yes, thank you.
Okay, great. I will go ahead and take roll call vote. Dr. Dara Thompson.
Aye.
Dr. Greta D'Amico.
Aye.
Dr. Mukherjee.
Aye.
Dr. Davidson.
Aye.
And Dr. Yoon.
Aye.
Great, and this passes with 5 ayes. Thank you. Okay, and the last agenda item, last legislation today would be AB 2685. Currently, we are on a watch stance for this. However, it is recommended by the staff to take a supportive stance on our Sunset Bill AB 2685.
I would like to motion that we take a supportive stance on AB 2685.
I second that motion.
And who did my second come from?
Dr. Yoon?
Thank you so much, Dr. Yoon.
You're welcome.
All right, and it looks like we need to go out for public comment, please.
The Q&A is open. Instructions on the screen. Click on the question mark inside of a square, type comment in the text field, and send to all panelists. You can also raise your hand by clicking on the hand raise feature next to your name. Or if you're calling in, you can raise your hand by pressing *3. No requests. Would you like me to close the Q&A?
Yes, thank you.
Wonderful. So I will go ahead and take a roll call vote on this. Is a motion to support AB 2685. Dr. Thompson.
Aye.
Thank you. Dr. D'Amico.
Aye.
Dr. Mukherjee.
Aye.
Dr. Davidson.
Aye.
And Dr. Yoon.
Aye.
Great. Looks like this moves with 5 ayes.
Great. So that was our last bill on agenda item number 6. I do want to check in. We have only a few other things on our agenda. We have agenda item number 7, and then, just future agenda items and next meeting dates. It is 11:39, so we've been on for over an hour and a half with no breaks. And we're also coming up onto a lunch hour. Rebecca, how much time do you think agenda item number 7 is going to take?
Thanks for asking. I don't think that we're going to have any more than about another, I would say, half an hour or so, because there's no public present. I don't see any stakeholder engagement happening today, which is the major reason that we brought this back to the full committee. So if you guys just want to take a couple minutes for a bio break, I would say go for it, and then we could just jump back on and get this done before lunch and break for the day.
All right, does anyone have any problem with that? Just taking a brief bathroom break and coming back and finishing prior to lunch. So it is 11:40 now. So we could be back on at 11:50 to finish up.
Sounds good.
All right, let's go into recess then.
Thank you.
All right, it's 11:50. So we're going to reconvene our meeting.
Wonderful. I will go ahead. This is Rebecca. I'm going to go ahead and take a roll call vote to make sure that everybody is back online and that we have quorum. All right. Dr. Thompson?
Present.
Dr. D'Amico?
Present.
Dr. Mukherjee?
Present.
Dr. Davidson?
Present.
And Dr. Yoon?
Present.
Wonderful. Looks like we have a quorum back.
Great. So we're moving on to agenda item 7, discussion, review, and possible action of the committee's intravenous therapy and advanced injection therapy regulation proposed text. As Rebecca said, this is supposed to be specifically for stakeholders to let us know their thoughts, and I don't believe we have any stakeholders present. I'm going to turn this over to Rebecca for a review.
Great, thank you so much. Moderator, do we have any public on the line that may have joined us in the past few minutes?
This is the Moderator Webex. We have no attendees or no public members.
Okay, thank you so much. Okay, well, as you guys have been advised already, we have made some amendments to the text since our last time that we've seen the regulation language. I believe we have our regulation attorney online as well. We thought we might need her if there were stakeholders here that had some feedback for us. It doesn't look like that happened. So I just wanted to kind of go over what happened and where we are with this regulation package at this time. So prior to this meeting, the committee members requested some items to be reviewed and clarified, amended, or added. Section 4237.1, proposed regulatory changes do not apply to basic intramuscular, intradermal, or subcutaneous injections of medications and nutrients, such as administering a B12 shot, which are part of the basic medical training of all naturopathic doctors. So when we discuss the advanced injection therapy, this would be for things that they would require possibly further training on providing. Let's see here. A change should be considered for the language in section 4237(1)(b). Currently, the language called for a recertification once every 5 years. However, the current renewal period occurs once every 2 years. Requiring a recertification every 5 years would have put an undue burden on licensees since it wasn't in line with their current continuing education cycle. It was recommended to change the requirement to either a 4 or 6 year recertification period, and at this time the committee members had made that recommendation to make it a 6-year recertification requirement. Further, in section 42371A, 4237.2, and 42372.2A, these are sections using the term injection therapies. The suggestion was made to change to advanced or specialized injection therapies for clarification. Finally, it was suggested that for the safe and effective administration of IV and advanced injection therapies, that NDs should be allowed to independently administer IV diphenhydramine. This is currently allowed for NDs providing the COVID-19 vaccination independently under the Governor Newsom's waiver. Since this cannot be gained in a regulatory change, I did reach out to the Assembly and Senate committees to see if they would put this in the sunset language. And because it was a little bit too scopy for them, they suggested that we check in with Senator Jones to see if they would place that in there for them. So we are looking at other avenues for that right now, but at this time, that is a no-go for the injection diphenhydramine. During the discussion for this agenda item, although the proposed text was already approved by the committee at a prior meeting, several NDs were concerned about the need for IV certification for injections. The IV and Advanced Therapy Subcommittee members shared that the reason for the proposed requirements came from the suggestion of the San Diego Attorney General's office. Any advanced injections needs additional training separate from that of what is provided in naturopathic medical schools. Due to the amount of concern from both the committee members and licensees, it was decided to table the agenda item and reconvene the IV and Advanced Therapy Subcommittee and amend the proposed text before moving forward. The reason that we put this on our agenda today was to reach out and get any stakeholder engagement. So it looks like at this point, since there's no stakeholders here today or present online to provide feedback, that we will go ahead, that we should go ahead and put this item back over to the subcommittee so that they can go ahead and continue working on the language. Are there any questions, concerns?
And then that would come back when the language is finalized, come back to the committee for final approval, correct?
That is correct. And yes, and so if there's any public comment at that time, of course, you guys would take that into consideration, and there will be opportunity to make any amendments to the language at that point before the package is submitted to OAL. And then, of course, there are a couple of, you know, opportunities for change at that point. Any questions?
Sounds good. Hopefully we'll hear more about diphenhydramine in the near future.
Yeah, I will definitely keep you guys apprised on what we hear back from them.
Mm-hmm. If we don't get that, we may have to remove it from the regulation, even though it makes good sense.
That is correct, yes. All right. Well, if there is nothing else on this, then my suggestion would be to go ahead and reconvene the subcommittee and get them working back on this, so I can go ahead and reach out to the subcommittee members and find out the best time and date for their next meeting so that they can start the work on this.
Would you mind, for the sake of everybody here, just repeating who's on that subcommittee? Maybe one of the members knows.
Give me 1 second. Let me take a look.
I'm actually on the subcommittee. So this is Dr. Thompson and
Dr. Singleton.
And Dr. Singleton and also Virginia Osborne.
That is correct, yes.
So do we need to ask for public comment since we asked for it at the beginning before we move on to the next agenda item?
Yeah, for best practices, we should.
Great. So moderator, can we ask for public comment?
Yes, the Q&A is now open. Instructions are on the screen. Question mark inside of a square. Click on that if you would like to participate. Enter comment in the text field sent to all panelists. You can also raise your hand by clicking on the hand raise icon next to your name, or if you're calling in, you can press *3. No requests. Would you like me to close the Q&A?
Yes, please do. All right. At this point, we are moving on to agenda item number 8, and that is future agenda items and next meeting dates.
Great. Thank you. So I have this is Rebecca. I've got 2 items on the agenda for our next meeting. One of those would be the EO evaluation that is normally conducted in the fall per DCA. So we will go ahead and put that on our next agenda. And then sunset update if needed. Those are the two items I have now. Is there any items that anybody wants to add?
Would we also be looking at the new text for the IV therapy at that time?
If the subcommittee was ready for it to be presented to the full committee, then yes, of course, we would put it on as well.
Are we ready now that it is the new fiscal year for the minor surgeries or minor office procedure subcommittee to meet? And would they have any recommendations to bring to the next meeting?
Yes, so the fiscal year has concluded from the prior year, and we have started our new fiscal year starting July 1st. So we definitely can start reconvening those subcommittees. So if you guys would like, I can, outside of this meeting, contact all of the subcommittee members and provide doodles to get those dates and times.
So I'd like to recommend that we put a placeholder on the next agenda for each subcommittee's report and possible action to vote on language of their work.
Perfect. All right. Anything else?
Rebecca, can you comment on the vacancies and what's going on with the search for some committee members?
Yes, we currently have 3 vacancies right now. So we are working with Department of Consumer Affairs, and they are working with the appointing offices to get those vacancies filled. We've got, it looks like 1 public member, 1 ND member, and 1 physician member vacancy.
Great, thank you.
You're welcome. But I will definitely put an update on the vacancies on our next.
I think we haven't, for a little while, since we didn't do it this meeting, we might want to just do an enforcement report, you know, some of the data.
Sure. I'll do an enforcement and license report on the next.
Thanks.
Okay, any other agenda items? All right, moving right along, would it be easier for everybody to take a look at their calendar and pick a date now, or do you guys want to have a doodle sent out? We are looking in the next quarter, so probably September-ish.
I always think it's best to seize the present moment.
Agreed.
And I'll be gone the entire week of the 19th. Are you thinking earlier in September?
So I know that for some people, they may be having kids going back to school the first week of September. Actually, sorry, that would be the second week of September. So the 5th, 6th is usually when the school year starts. So we may have some people that may not want to do early mornings for those 2 days. However, we could definitely do either September 1st, September 2nd, 7th through the 9th, and even going to the week of the 12th through the 16th. I'm going to look over to our attorney to see if he's okay with any of those dates.
I think I only have a conflict on the 9th.
On the 9th, okay. So we're going to go ahead and remove the 9th, and it looks like I actually have a meeting on the 9th too. So,
so how about either the 6th or the 8th?
Okay. I know we've had a pretty good luck with Thursdays, so the 8th looks like it would be a potential date, good date for everybody.
Yeah, and the 6th is right after a holiday, so it might be a little safer to go to the 8th.
Right. Okay. Everybody okay with September 8th, 10 o'clock?
Yes.
Yes.
Perfect.
Yeah, that works.
All
Great.
right. Looks good. Sounds good. Okay. We will definitely, I will be reaching out to all of the members to provide information about the upcoming meeting, and I will also be reaching out to the subcommittee members, it's a mouthful, to get the best dates and times to get those subcommittees reconvened. All right. I think that is all for me for now, so I'm going to go ahead and hand this back over to our chair.
Great. Do we need any public comment on this particular agenda item?
We should take it for each agenda item.
Great. Can we open for public comment then?
This is the moderator. The Q&A is open. Instructions are on the screen. To participate, click on the question mark inside of a square, type comment, and send it to all panelists. You can also raise your hand by clicking on the icon, the raise hand icon next to your name. For those calling in, you can press *3 to raise your hand. No requests have been submitted. Would you like me to close the Q&A?
Yes, thank you so much.
Thank you.
All right. So that was our last agenda item. So at this point, I would like to adjourn the July 14th, 2022 meeting of the Naturopathic Medical Committee. It is 12:06 p.m. I hope everyone enjoys the rest of their day.
Great. Thank you so much.
Thanks. Bye-bye.